I like that.
Hey guys, it's Sean with the Second Class Parent Podcast. I'm here today with Cary, and he's going to tell us his story. It's about his fight for his little girl, and I'm going to turn it over to him. How you doing today, Cary?
Doing all right. Admittedly, so a smidge nervous, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good. I've been in this fight for some time and would love to get my story out there. So I'm very happy to have met you, Sean.
Awesome. I'm glad to meet you too, brother. Listen,
Oh.
don't be nervous. Just say what you got to say. This is your time and your story, so I'm just going to listen to what you got to say.
So I guess I could start off with me and Brandy met at a time in, I guess, our lives when I wasn't exactly the greatest person. She wasn't exactly the greatest person. And anyhow, over a few years' time, there was definitely some violence going on. Violence was on me, not me doing the violence. So you can't really see my scar. But back in 2015, Brandy picked up a large vase of flowers and smashed it over my head, putting 9 staples in my head. And that was just one of the incidences of violence from Brandy. The courts eventually convicted her of a disorderly conduct, kind of giving her a slap on the wrist for it and having her go to anger management, which did very little to help the situation. But it's neither here nor there. We conceived Piper when I was 30, and she had Piper when I was 31. And Piper Marjorie Jean Kessel, my cutie in the background here, and I'm going to show you guys if you can see it or not. I get it up there. That's Piper and me. She had really long hair as a baby and really cute meat sleeves. You see there. I had decided then that, when Brandy had conceived Piper, I had decided I needed to clean up my act and had already been working on cleaning up my act. But at the same time frame, there had been some domestics in which they were charging me with domestics, and then they put a DANCO in place, which they called domestic abuse no contact order. They never convicted me of any of the DANCOs or any of the domestic. I never got convicted of domestics, but I got convicted of DANCO violations because she kept asking me to come back, pay the bills, take care of the kids, take care of the house, the things that men like to do when they're parents, And anyhow, fast forward sometime after Piper was born, Brandy had Brandy had promised that she wasn't going to go back to meth or wasn't going to use meth. And I was pretty confident that she was capable, being that I don't think Piper would have went full term if she was using methamphetamines. And she really had become a lot better, nicer person to be around off of the drugs. But as soon as she didn't have Piper in her womb, she got back on her Adderall and some other psych meds that I'm not against her being on. But her Adderall is so similar to methamphetamines that it didn't take very long for her to go back to abusing methamphetamines. When Piper was 11 months old, 2 different incidents happened that made me infuriated. One, I come downstairs one afternoon because I used to sleep until about noon on the weekends when I was home and come and take over in the early afternoon. And I went downstairs to find Brandy looking like she's spun and telling me about some story about how this big mirror fell on our daughter, and she had one of her 2 front teeth that were growing in at the time was chipped. Of course, that would infuriate any father. And her story was that a mirror fell on her. It's believable, but the mirror should have never been in a place where my child at that age could have had a mirror falling on her. It was not one that was hanging. It was one that was loosely set on the ground, and a large one. And then shortly thereafter, because we verbally fought a lot, there was an incident where my daughter wound up with my sister, Candy, for overnight which was something that neither of us had been comfortable with. But she wanted with my sister overnight. We got her back the next day with a duct tape typer, duct tape makeshift paper towel diaper on her with one of them telltale signs of MRSA on her flavia. And I remember that being, I was very heated about that. And at that time is when I decided I needed to start figuring out, how do I get my daughter safe from her? You know, Brandy is the daughter of a retired police officer in Isanti County. She's sister-in-law to a retired law enforcement in Isanti County, the same Isanti County sheriffs. And she would often show me on her Facebook that she's graduated and Facebook friends with Wayne Cyberlick, who is a really well commended police officer in Isanti County sheriffs. Someone who's done quite a bit, and even in 2018 ran against the head sheriff to become head sheriff. He didn't, but you know that he's got a lot of, accommodations in order for him to feel like he could win. And not that I believed her that he would protect her, but she comes from a cop family. So throughout that fall, I was trying to figure out what to do. And Brandy just started to use methamphetamines openly in the house. And I wasn't okay with meth being around in my house and being around my daughter. And then it got to a point where there was meth and company around. Also around summertime earlier that year, I'd come home from work and there was this creepy guy, Creepy Lynn, we call him, was sitting in the living room with my daughter while Brandy was high upstairs in the bathroom. She had told me that Creepy Lynn she thought was sleeping with the autistic 13-year-old girl across the way. So the fact that she had said that, and then weeks later I find him in the living room with my daughter, of course I'm livid. I'm livid about the situation. I'm livid that there's nothing I can do about it. I'm a well-recognized, quote, criminal in the community. I have a very recognizable name, Cary Berry. So all of the cops up there know who I am by name, by face. I didn't know what to do. By winter time, it had gotten so bad that I had 2 or 3 different Danko violations. Again, I never got convicted of a domestic, but I got convicted of these Danko violations. And I thought I was on the last one where it'd be a felony if I got another one. And I finally broke down in early March of 19 and told my probation officer what was going on in the home. Told her, I had to admit to violating probation. I had to admit to basically be incriminating information in order to express my concerns for my daughter and the situation and ask for help. I knew there was scales there. I knew that she had moved in now no offense to trannies, but a tranny meth dealer that she was worried was suicidal and homeless. So that's why she was moving her into our house. And of course I wouldn't be okay with that. So of course I'm not allowed at the house then. So that's when I first approached my probation officer in early March of 2019 about the situation. Now, the probation officer at the time, her name is Cary Oman, and she was a pretty reasonable probation officer. And she said, well, I'd like you to go to this officer, Wayne Cyberlick. I explained Brandy's connection to him. She sighed and said, that's who I want you to go to anyways. All right. So myself feeling like my arms are being pulled about this, I chose to go in and meet with this officer, Wayne Cyberlick, and did the same thing. I spent about 6 or 8 hours in his office, humiliating myself, crying and explaining the situation and I don't know what to do to get my kids safe, but I need her safe. I'm okay with doing jail time. I'll go to jail. I don't care about that, but get my daughter safe.
I'm just curious as to, like, you said that a couple of times about, you have a criminal past and you had violated parole and stuff like that. Now, I understand that your ex, drug addict. What type of criminal issues were you having that you would have been actually put in jail for reaching out to get help for your daughter? I'm just curious about that because you seem, when you talked to me before, like you had actually got away from that and had started to live more of a non-criminal lifestyle. So I'm just curious as to what was going on at that point.
So at the time, At the time, they were in the process of convicting me for another Danko violation. So it hadn't happened yet. I was still going through court. During that period of time, the Danko was still in place. So telling them that I was at that house, telling them that I was there with Brandy would have been a Danko violation and admitting to another crime in their eyes.
That makes sense. That actually makes sense to me. Go ahead. I was needed some clarification because I was confused as to what the situation was.
Brandy would call me back to go to the house, to take care of the house, pay the bills, fill the refrigerator, and this had happened a handful of times. And then she would want to have her meth friends over, and she knew I wasn't okay with it, so she would call the cops on me. This was a common thing. And that's why I said it got to the point where I was under the impression that it would be a felony the next time. And that's one of the reasons, one of my deciding factors, outside of the abuse of my daughter, that I had no say in it. I could watch it, see it be done, but I had no say in it. And had I, for example, in my mind's eye, had I called the cops on her when she was using drugs in the home, I can almost guarantee they would have arrested me and left my daughter high, Brandy high, with my daughter. Now, either which, so to move, forward on this, I don't know that we need to read all these documents unless you have an interest in it. But you can very clearly show that you can very clearly see that Brandy's friend even writes in his report to both CPS and to the drug task force, he writes that he does know Brandy and that he is Facebook friends with her and did graduate with her. Now, mind you, this was a town of 500 people in a class of probably less than 20. This isn't like a big city where you have a whole lot of people. Right. And so they were well acquainted. And Brandy had described him as a guy that wanted her romantically all through high school and then was also a friend of the family. If you scroll through the website, the father's presentation, a presentation from a good father, he put together something really well for me. And towards the end of it, you can very clearly see Chuck Larson, his friends with Wayne Cyberlick, that's Brandy's father. You can also see that what the end result of me going into the police that day to try and get my child safe wasn't my daughter getting safe at all. Instead, what it was the cops then went and raided 2 of my 3 witnesses to the abuse of my daughter. And the abuse of my daughter, what Wayne Cyberlick had said, well, look, from what you're saying today, I wish I could get into her home right now. I wish there was someone on probation there so I could go and move forward with a warrant based on the stuff you're saying and go do what do you call that? But basically get into the house.
Right.
And whatnot. So instead, he says to me, can you go and get me evidence? I want evidence in the form of people recorded saying that they were using methamphetamines with Brandy while she's in the care of your daughter. If you get me 3 of these, this should be enough to get your daughter safe. I can't give you legal advice, and I'm not suggesting this or whatever, but this is, he wanted to protect himself or whatever by saying he can't give me legal advice. I don't think the man expected me to go out as quickly as I did and get that. Within about 72 hours, I had all 3 recordings. That next week, I was in his office giving him those recordings. Now, one of the things that I know from Minnesota is that police have 3 days to cross-report with child protection and child protection vice versa. That's the state mandate. This guy, first of all, it was an obvious conflict of interest and he should have recused himself. Instead, he intentionally kept himself involved. Also, he never cross-reported immediately. You can look at the dates, it took them until the 25th of March in order for CPS to get their first report from him, even though clearly shows that it was on the 13th that I went and met with him of March and told him about the child abuse. So there was, hands down, there's been just tons of procedural things that have not happened in my daughter's favor. So if you fast forward, CPS did get involved. And that's something that I was going to show you here. If I could find the right paperwork. But ultimately, Alicia Steinberg was involved and another CPS worker were involved back in 2019. And they ultimately closed the case because Brandy wasn't compliant. And the county attorney wasn't okay with letting them open up a CHIPS case. As far as I know, that doesn't happen. Brandy had called up the agency to tell them, hey, look, I've got a clean UA I can give you. She gives them a dirty UA for alcohol, a faint line of methamphetamines, and a dirty UA for marijuana, even though she was super excited to give them a clean UA. It's ridiculous. So anyhow, CPS went to the county attorney because Brandy wasn't cooperating with them and asked to open up a case. The county attorney, probably Jeff Edblad, someone I don't like and doesn't like me, denied CPS then. Fast forward to now this year, last year, 2020. In the middle of summer, I was waiting for the Danco to expire so I could at least call her and see if I could see my daughter. You know, I had stopped contact with her for that since March of last year until now, until 2020, until the Danco was gone. So she couldn't use that against me again. She couldn't have me arrested or thrown in jail again over, the Danco violation. And so I get a phone call within a week of when the Danco was being ended from CPS asking me if I know where Brandy and my daughter are. Of course, I don't know where they are. I don't know what's going on with my daughter. But they were getting reports from the boys' dad, because she lost her boys to their dad, about how there's shit smeared all over the walls in the house. The kids don't ever come back bathing because the bathroom that has the shower in it doesn't work. And they believe mom's on methamphetamines again. The younger boy says he doesn't believe my daughter should have to live like that. And this is a result of their failures from 2019. And so we have June 9th, 2020, Isani County Family Services received a cross report concern from Bram Police Department regarding Piper and two half brothers. They initial their names AU and MU while in the care of Miss Larson. Report described concerns regarding condition of Miss Larson's home. It was reported Miss Larson's son Maddox was trying to help her organize and clean stuff out of the home. It was reported that the upstairs bathroom was not accessible, that poop was smeared on the walls, dirty dishes stacked up in the kitchen sink. Because of the bathroom issues, the family had to take baths at a friend's house. Porter expressed concerns Miss Larson was using methamphetamines again. Law enforcement, there was a handful of times that law enforcement tried to make entry and tried to knock on their door to get to Brandy, and they couldn't. Brandy knows she can run from CPS for 45 days and that they'll have to close their case. They'll have to find a new catalyst for opening up another case, and that's what she was trying to do. So one of the things I wanted to read to you guys was some of this report that's from CPS that they sent up this summer. And I want to find some of the key points so that I'm not wasting time of people. Wasting people's time. So here's some Isani County staff family services completed 2 unannounced visits. This was back in 2019. Visit to the Bram PD, no response. Miss Larson's vehicle was observed in the parking lot back in 2020. After second visit, Riley, her oldest daughter, who is now 19 or 20, I can't remember, was seen leaving the home. A traffic stop occurred. Riley reported Miss Larson was in the home. She had told Riley not to speak with child protection or law enforcement. Isani County Family Services obtained information Piper was with her maternal aunt and uncle. Now this was back in 2019 that she had given my daughter away to her brother and sister-in-law for about a month. And this was when, this is what happened. Yeah. Piper was at her aunt and uncle's. Contact was made with Piper at their home. Later, Miss Larson contacted the agency. She was notified of the report. Miss Larson stated she wanted to give a drug screen to prove she was clean. Miss Larson met with Isani County Family Services staff, denied ever using methamphetamine. She admitted to using marijuana. Miss Larson provided a quick drug screen that showed a faint line for methamphetamines, positive for THC. That's what it was. And Miss Larson reported she was a daily user, usually using around 11 a.m. when her soaps were on, and reported smoking in the bathroom with the fans on. Then she uses around 2 p.m. and around 8 p.m. So they know that she's using drugs, and they mind mood-altering drugs. Fast forward. Yeah, I find this interesting. So they created a plan for a safety plan for Piper to remain with her aunt and uncle. Miss Larson struggled to understand why she couldn't parent Piper if the agency was not removing her. Now, mind you, they never called me or let me know about this after I had been in contact with them about all these issues. They never let the dad know. As if my daughter doesn't have another parent that cares about her. Her oldest son was hesitant to provide information regarding Miss Larson's home. He discussed Miss Larson's home was not very clean and blamed Piper. He reported this is 2020, June of 2020. They went and interviewed the boys. He was hesitant to provide information about Brandy, which makes sense. He's protecting his mother. I cannot give him, any. I appreciate what the boys did say. He reported there was a lot of stuff everywhere. He discussed the rooms were filled with toys and junk and clothes, that there was a pathway in the living about the feces in the home. He stated that it was Piper's fault. Yes, my toddler's fault, because she leaves her diapers all around. He was asked about the bathroom, and he reported there's usually one working. While describing his time at home, he mainly spends it with his sister. And however, it appeared, So he says he enjoys spending time with mom, but most of the time he spends at his mom's house with his older sister. And that's true. I know that from previous experience. He reported he likes spending time at Miss Larson's home because he has fun and there was no chores. Ashes Miss Larson's home was cleaner, and added that Maddox was helping her get rid of stuff. He further explained he wouldn't call Miss Larson a hoarder, but she likes stuff. Following up the statement of the house wasn't that bad, he placed blame on Piper for making messes. Asher also wishes Miss Larson would obtain employment again. He discussed Miss Larson believes there are people watching her, which is why she keeps her curtains closed at all times. He didn't seem to think that was the case, but expressed that was a concern of Miss Larson's. He also denied knowing anything about her chemical use. And then we may have to cut out their names, I'm sorry, for their sake. But so MU describes Miss Larson's home, this is the younger son, as a mess. He expressed his belief Piper should not be in a place like that. He reported the kitchen's overloaded with dishes. Living room has things all over. Piper throws food all around in there that doesn't get picked up. Matters stated he talked to Miss Larson about limiting Piper's food in there. Also, MU describes the dining room as needing to be fixed up. He also blamed Piper for making messes in the home. While discussing what the family does while visiting, he disclosed Miss Larson spends a lot of her time sleeping. Now, if she's not high and spun, she's sleeping and passed out and avoiding the kids. And if she's not sleeping, she spends a lot of time in her bathroom, which is she calls her office. And the writer inquired about who watches Piper while Miss Larson was sleeping. He reported everyone he discussed. Piper will sit on the bed while she is sleeping and watch TV. Maddox expressed his belief of a solution And he suggested just taking everything out of the house, cleaning the house, and then only putting back in what was necessary. He believes this would be a big task and that Brandy would need a lot of sleep for it. He inquired if he could talk about me. He was encouraged to talk about anything he wanted to. He discussed that sometimes he wishes I was still around. Even though there was fighting between his mother and I, he knows that he knows that would break the family up. So I guess Brandy has the other kids brainwashed into thinking I'm a horrible person. However, Mr. Kessel had a job, supported the family, and both discussed things they enjoyed doing with Mr. Kessel. Now, these are just a handful of the different statements and different documents that they had when they first tried to open up this case and they first opened up the case. The boys are awesome. I love the boys, and I couldn't be more proud of them for saying what they said.
Now, have you guys actually been to custody court yet?
No, I was not aware that the case had been closed, and I was under the wrong impression in between June of 2020 and back in 2019. I wasn't aware that they had closed the case, and I was also under the impression, because Brandy's made it clear, if I fight for my daughter, if I tell CPS about what's going on, I'm never going to see her again. And back in 2019, shortly after I had gotten Wayne involved and CPS was knocking on her door back then, I had received messages from some of her friends saying that she was going to give my daughter away to someone and I'll never see my child again. Oh, come to find out, she did try and give Piper away to her brother and sister. That was one of the other things I wanted to mention in here, is that back in 2008, Brandy had been, gosh, I don't know where it's at, but basically back in 2008, Brandy had MU, the second son. And during the pregnancy, when she found out she was pregnant, she decided to drink harder and use meth more in an attempt to kill him in the womb. And he came out at 26 weeks and has lifelong medical issues and will likely have lifelong medical issues as a result. So CPS was opened up on her back then. Well, she tried to give Maddox away to her other sister, the one that's married to the retired sheriff from Isanti County, and they live down in Mankato, I think, now. And so after a year of that, the father found out that she was trying to give legal custody of the son away, and he got involved. Richard's his name. He had apparently gone through treatment and bettered his life, and he went for custody of the boys. And the only reason CPS is closed back then, as far as I know, is because she no longer had custody of the boys. They had like supervised visits set up and visitations set up, and she didn't have the boys. She did still have Riley, who the father of Riley's father's name is Jamie. And I've had a few discussions with him, and the only thing he really says is he kicks himself for not going and getting custody of Riley when his dad was getting custody of the boys. And I don't really know what came of that. I don't quite understand why they didn't want her to have her kids, how she wound up with Riley. Also in the documentation you can read, they took custody of all three kids from Brandy temporarily back in 2008 or 2009. And that's her older three kids. It's not like she hasn't been around through this before. Now, with my fight for my daughter, they wound up opening the case. They got a CHIPS case open. There's been 2 times that you can read through these documents that, first of all, last year, 2 years ago in 2019, they did their best to get a case open. The county attorney denied them. And then earlier this year, when we finally got Brandy to show up for court, what had happened was they told me to take any legal recourse action that I could to try and get Piper, because they couldn't find Brandy. the stuff that was being reported about Piper's situation was scary, to say the least, for anyone. You know, she's only a toddler. And make a long story short, CPS, again, they seen her. I filed for an OFP, or a restraining order, to get Piper safe from Brandy. The restraining order was denied, but Brandy showed up for court for that. It was on day 42 of their 45 days that they have to actually get a hold of her. And by her demeanor, by her appearance, by the things she was saying, she was telling the judge that she was running from CPS, and then backtracking and saying she's running from me, and then backtrack saying she's running from CPS. I don't understand why the judge didn't take my daughter from her then. But CPS immediately filed for an emergency change of custody based on Brandy's appearance, demeanor, the way she talked about CPS being a conspiracy to steal children, and CPS is Child Protection Services up in my state. I know it's different in other states, or has different letters, terminologies. Again, the judge denied CPS, which is unusual. This is very unusual. Usually the judge goes and sides with child protection, and usually sides with the professionals. And in this case with my daughter, they're just not. It's literally as if, because of my past experiences with the court system in this small town, they all know me. I was a jerk when I was in my 20s. I didn't care who you were, if you were the judge, or if you were a probation officer, if you were a cop. I told you my mind, and it usually ended not well for me. You know, I just spoke my mind, and I learned, you know, in my later years, that just was immature of me. And now I feel like I'm facing the consequences, because here Brandy's a cop's daughter, and I'm a piece of shit in their eyes, and my kid gets to suffer. Doesn't matter how many times she misses UAs. It doesn't matter how many dirty UAs she gives them for marijuana and alcohol. They've now been testing her, and she's been missing UAs and been giving them dirty UAs. Says in her case plan that she's supposed to do a chemical use assessment if she gives them so much as one, dirty UA for something that has mood altering drugs in it. They're not following through with anything that they say they're supposed to on their case plan. And just since the last 3 months, so Brandy decided to let Piper back in my life for 3 months, from October until December. And I seen my daughter more than half of the time. I had my daughter more than half of the time. And the only thing that sucked about it was Brandy wanted to be around for it. And eventually that led to, a fight, in which she had told CPS she pushed me, although she assaulted me, and she broke my phone, and she grabbed my daughter out of bed and drove her home drunk one night. I know she was coming down off of meth, because I know what Brandy looks like when she's coming down off of stimulants. She has telltale signs. Her being aggro as fuck is one of them, Not that she's over here. I talk with my hands sometimes. And so in the last 3 months since the beginning of the year, or December 31st, she assaulted me. She broke my phone. She interfered with the 911 call. She told CPS she went PTSD. She was off of her meds for 3 weeks, and she lost power to her house. And we went back into court in February 14th. So, and at that point in time, it had been a month and a half's time, all this went down. And when you can read through the reports, they have to counter Adderall because her count's never accurate. It is consistently inaccurate. If you're not abusing your Adderall, why is the count always off? How can you take the other meds as prescribed, but you can't take your Adderall as prescribed? It doesn't make sense. It's as if they're covering up for everything wrong she's doing, and they're applauding her for the very little she is doing. My daughter made it to Head Start, which they're making Brandy get my daughter in Head Start because she's almost 4 years old. She's about the size of a 2-year-old, and she's delayed in speech. They want her in Head Start so that they have extra people, eyes and ears on my daughter, that are mandated reporters. So Brandy's gotten her to Head Start 4 out of 12 times and continues to bicker with the case management, the case manager, Samantha, about whether or not she even wants Piper in Head Start. And so I'm at this stage in the battle where I don't understand. You guys, the state's documented all this stuff. They're reporting it all, but they don't want to go by their own procedures. They don't want to go by their own mandates set in place in order to protect children. You know, they have a universal, basically, procedures in place to protect children. I recently started the website Justice for Piper because of all of this, because I don't know what else to do. I heard a story of a gentleman who was fighting for his kids, and it was a much worse situation where the stepfather and mother were sexually abusing the kids. And he posted online a face of the judge that basically says, here's Cynthia, this crappy judge who gives children to pedophiles. Within 3 weeks, he had custody of his children because that judge finally got fucking thrown into the media light, and she didn't like that. She didn't like being considered the judge who gives children to pedophiles. So I'm wondering, is this my only recourse? Get my story out there, show that, look, the judge, the county, the police involved, none of them are doing the procedures that are put in place to keep my child safe. They don't have an excuse. We can point at, sure, maybe because she's a cop's daughter, or sure, maybe because I'm well disliked in the community. Neither of those are excuses for you to not follow the procedures that the state has put in place to keep children safe.
Right.
They're supposed to cross-report with one another when crimes are going on. The child protection worker is the newest child protection worker to Isani County Child Protection, the least educated, and doesn't know anything about the law. What is criminal, child abuse? What does our state say about child abuse and child neglect and medical neglect? She doesn't know what crimes are, so she doesn't know what to cross-report with law enforcement. They won't charge her with any crimes against my child unless a law enforcement officer first, writes up a complaint and gives it to the DA, ultimately, or a citation or whatever, however that works. So CPS isn't in the position, nor do they have the intelligence in Isani County to accurately protect children. There's been more than one case of severe child abuse in Isani County, completely related to the mothers being on methamphetamines. There was an infant that was killed in Bram not too many years ago, and that the kid was killed. The two parents were on meth, and it was absolutely tied to their meth use that this infant was murdered by his parents. And it's really unfortunate because it's as if they don't care. They want to pass off responsibility. There's a county attorney involved. He can read the crimes that are done against my daughter in the documents, but he won't do anything about it because a local law enforcement hasn't handed him that information. I don't understand that aspect of this.
So let me ask you this. The CPS case, is it still open?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, what you really have to do is your daughter still in her care, or is she with somebody else?
As far as I know, she's still in her mother's care.
Okay.
I haven't had contact with the mother since January.
Honestly, you have to do whatever you can do to get this CPS case closed. And the reason I say that is because they're not going to let you file for custody and have a custody case with an open CPS case. So if you have a lawyer,
I just wanted to say yes.
You need to talk to your lawyer about him or her interacting with not DIFUS, but CPS in your state, and explain that this case needs to close. The daughter needs to be removed from her if she's still currently using, and if she's not complying with giving a urinalysis, or she's given hot urines, that child should have been removed, and if not placed with you, placed in a safe, environment, because she shouldn't be allowed to be around your child using drugs. Once she's placed in a different home, if they close the case, you can file for custody and, take the same information that you're sharing with us in the court. But the bottom line is that that's not going to happen until the CPS case is closed.
I'd like to say that I'm upset about everything, but the reality is from a year ago and 2 years ago today, there's a whole lot more for me to actually win and gain custody once the case is closed based on the information, the documents that are there, and agreed. If the court's considered child best interest factors, Piper would be with me, or Piper would be placed in another home, like you just said. They don't consider child best interest factors in child protection cases. And it's not beyond me. I've read into it. And so I would like them to close the case, but being that Brandy, I don't know if they're going to close the case anytime soon or not. But I do believe that if they were to just drop the case right now, then I could move forward, probably even with an emergency ex parte motion to get Piper. And I've tried to convince my lawyer to move forward with an emergency ex parte motion anyways. And it's not that I have a bad working relationship with my lawyer. I think that my lawyer spends a lot of his lunches with these same judges and prosecutors. He also used to work with them. So when I've told him, look, let's move forward with the ex parte motion, he says, well, what's new? Well, all right, we could start off with the fact that Brandy had Piper back in my life for more than 50% of the time, and then rip Piper out of my life. This isn't about it hurting me. This is what's considered another adverse childhood experience on my daughter. We know that X amount of adverse childhood experiences that children have before age of 5 leads to a dramatically shorter life expectancy. So just based on that, the fact that she is intentionally ripping Piper out of my life for her own personal reasons, I think should be something that's considered. But to me, that's something that should be considered as a reason why. Her assaulting me, driving her home drunk, those things are all good reasons as well. But this is what we can prove. Look, I had constant contact with my daughter. Yes, it hurts me to not be around my daughter, but how much is it hurting my daughter? That's what I think they need to take into consideration. This is another abuse of my child while under Isanti County Family Services supervision that they're just letting happen. I don't believe that's fair to the child at all. I don't think it's fair to Piper at all. I understand that legally it's in her rights to keep my child from me because I was never married to her. I get that. That doesn't mean that it should be legally in her rights to abuse my kid at the whim of her emotions, if that makes any sense.
Well, I've never understood the idea that it's okay to keep a child from their parent because they weren't married. I mean, once paternity is established, you should have just as much rights to the child as she has. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know all states are different, but that's just
agreed.
That's something I believe wholeheartedly. So
I'm very much a promoter of 50-50 parenting at separation, and it shouldn't matter if you're married or not. That's nonsense. Whether you're married or not shouldn't give you less rights to your own children. If I wasn't married and I wasn't married, I had my kid, I earned the right to pay child support. I should have the same rights that Brandy has to my daughter as a father.
Absolutely.
And just because we're not married, they shouldn't.
Right. And the thing is it should automatically be 50-50 unless there's a reason for it not to be, like one parent's a drug user. Like that's not good. So
right. No, I agree with you.
So
I would think that in most situations. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, finish your thought.
I would think in most situations, absolutely it should be 50-50 at separation. No parent should have more rights than the other parent. And if there is conflict between them that needs to go in front of court, then yes, the court may have to order something. But otherwise, yes, if you think I'm not a fit parent, then you should be able to take me to court and tell the judge that. Well, it should be 50-50 before you prove to the judge I'm unfit, and same vice versa. It should be 50-50. We both have equal rights to our child. We both have equal rights with the taking her to medical care, school, so on and so forth. Unless you think I'm unfit and you can prove it. And I think that should be in all cases, because absolutely there's a lot of cases where women are definitely more unfit or completely unfit in comparison to the father, but simply due to this messed up clause in the law, men are really given a lot of men are disenfranchised at trying to get their children because of how the laws are.
Correct. So
I know that there's evidence that shows that I'm listening.
So where do you go? Where do you go from here? Where we're at now? Like, what is your game plan for getting
All right.
Piper safe?
At the current, my game plan is basically getting my message out there more, getting more people to see and read this story, and trying to get the outside influence of the community to put pressure on the city and state officials to actually do what they are trained and supposed to do. Simply follow the damn procedures that are put in place to protect our children from my child would get my child safe. There's a whole laundry list of procedures that haven't been followed. I don't care who's to blame anymore so much as it needs to get fixed. You know, so how hard is it to admit mistake, change so that this kid is safe? You know, that's what my plan is. Outside of that, it's waiting. I gotta wait until May for the next court date. My attorney, like I said, refuses to file an emergency ex parte motion, claiming it's a frivolous motion. I don't quite understand that. I don't want to argue with him because I can't afford an attorney. He's the state appointed attorney in this situation. If they close the case against Brandy, then I'll file for custody. And I believe that without a doubt, I have a much better fighting chance in this state of getting my daughter now after all this documentation. So there's a little bit of the waiting game, but there's also I think it's important to get this out there to a broader audience so that they understand that the people in Isani County aren't doing their jobs. They're intentionally failing my daughter and letting her get abused. All you have to do is read through the documents. It would take far too long to sit and read them to you, I think, out loud. But just read through the documents and you'll see. From her cop family friend protecting her and preventing her from seeing charges of child abuse, to the county attorney refusing to open up the case last year, and to now where she has 4 or 5 things that are required of her, such as giving them clean UAs, with the expectation if she doesn't, she does a chemical use assessment. Yet somehow she hasn't done a chemical use assessment yet, given them plenty of dirty UAs for marijuana at minimum, and they still haven't required her to do the things that are set on the case plan for her to do. I don't understand, other than why are the procedures set in place not being followed?
Good question.
And
is there anything
beyond that? I don't know.
Is there anything that you want people watching this or listening to it to know that you haven't actually told us yet? Like anything that you want to make sure that they hear?
I want the audience to know this. Please, whether you know your wife or your husband, whether you know how content you are right now, please invest into nanny cams. Have some that your other significant other doesn't know about. I'm not saying that you need to put them up now and start spying on your significant other, but God forbid this ever becomes your guys. If you ever split up, the only thing that's going to protect you from this is having hard evidence. If you have some nanny cams up to prove, okay, she's unfit, look at what she's doing to my kid, that would have saved me all of this hassle. If I simply had one recording of her snorting meth, one recording of her smoking meth, would probably have saved me a whole lot of hassle. And I'm not suggesting that you guys, are having kids with people that you intend on breaking up with, but at this stage in the game, 50% of marriages fail. Most marriages wind up with children in them. Please help yourselves out and make sure that you have certain things in place to protect yourself and your relationship with your children. And nanny cams are a good start, because when it starts getting shaky and rocky, you can start to use those if need be, and you can at least prove if they're, if you have a significant other that's like Brandy was, and is on drugs, neglecting the kid, so on and so forth. If otherwise, they're just going to consider what you're saying as hearsay. They're not going to care, and they're most likely not going to investigate appropriately.
Now, will you?
Other things I would say to
Go ahead.
Specifically to men, and look, parental alienation is becoming a whole lot less taboo to talk about. This is a topic that is gaining national limelight across, not just across our country, but across the globe. So there's some hope out there if you're in this fight currently like I am. There's absolutely some hope that we're going to start seeing changes. I've seen a couple of things on Facebook showing, I think Arkansas is making an amendment to make it 50-50 shared parenting as a base to start with. And that's what we should have across the country. So there's hope out there, men, but we do need to keep speaking out and speaking up against this. We have a handful of minor celebrities, I would say, that I've personally spoken with in short. I don't even know if you could call them minor celebrities, but Adrienne Edwards is Miss South Dakota, and she's wanting to use her platform to raise awareness to parental alienation and to try and combat parental alienation, and it's devastating effects that it has on children. Also, there's a guy who I just recently heard about and talked to. His name is Dave Wang, and I'm not trying to just promote people. I'm really not. This guy's name's Dave Wang. He's a Christian artist, singer from Canada, and he's going to be dropping a new music video that is specifically about parental alienation on Father's Day. So I want to give men hope. The struggle is real. The fight sucks, but your kids are worth it. Your children
Absolutely.
have to be worth it to you. Keep fighting. It breaks my heart every time I hear about a father killing themselves. I completely understand the emotions and the raw feelings that drive you to that low of a point in these fights. Please don't. Please see there's light at the end of this tunnel.
And in the future, can you keep us updated on Piper and how everything's going with that?
Absolutely. I would love to. Thank you so much for helping me get my story out there. I did want to, before we're done here, name off some specific people that if you want to look into, message, email, speak your mind to. Judge Amy R. Bronsonham of Isani County is the judge that read through all these documents and supposedly read through the documents and somehow agreed that Piper should still be with her mother. Wayne Cyberlick is next in line to be head sheriff of Isani County. And again, you can read how he chose to protect Brandy Larson, who was abusing my daughter, instead of my daughter, Piper, who can't even speak for herself. His boss is Chris Kalk of Isani County. If you want to message those folks specifically, as well as Penny Messer of Isani County Family Services, those would be good people to call up, voice concerns and frustration with the handling of this case and with my daughter. Outside of those three folks, I don't really think it's important to name off specific individuals on the YouTube here necessarily.
Okay. Well, I
I
appreciate
guess I
the
probably
time.
had a lot more I could have said, but
What is your address of your website?
it's www.justice for Piper, justice the number 4 Piper at wordpress.com.
That way
I don't
anybody.
know if I can. No.
No.
Oh, all right. What? Wait a minute. Then what is it?
It's www.justice
www.justice
for
Piper
.wordpress.com.
.wordpress.com.
Awesome. So anybody
I
that
kind of hope that you.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Anybody. Listen, I'm listening to you. I'm sorry. I'm good at interrupting. I don't want to interrupt you. I appreciate you very much, Sean.
I appreciate you giving your story so that people can understand what's going on. I was just going to say that anybody that wants to learn more about Piper's story can visit your website and read the documents for themselves.
Absolutely. And a fun piece that's in there that makes it a little easier to read is if you check out what's a good father's presentation he put together. It's kind of like a slideshow of the different pieces of these different documents that they've had, and kind of culminates towards the end. It makes it a little easier to read all of it because all the documents can be a bit much to try and sit and read at one time, if that makes sense.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming on, and
Yeah.
keep in touch and let me know what's going on. And if anything changes, maybe we'll bring you back on and try to, update everybody on Piper's story.
Right on. I appreciate it. And like I said, gentlemen, I'm at a stage where with the fight, yes, I don't have my daughter safe yet. And that's the key word. I have a whole lot more to go on when they do close this case to actually gain custody of my daughter. So I'm not at a hopeless state. I do wish she was safe quicker, but there does look to be some light at the end of this tunnel too, for me and for Piper.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to hearing from you later.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sean. And I hope to see more of these videos from you, of you with talking to other guys and sharing their stories. And I'll send a few your direction if they haven't heard of you yet, if
Awesome,
you're okay
thanks.
with that.
That would be great. But there are definitely more in the pipe.
Right on.
Have a good night, brother.
You as well. Thank you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.